Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Janjana. Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Janjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading this morning from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 4, text 29 through 42. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the format here is that we go around the room and everyone will read some verses.
After that night passed, Kamsa summoned his ministers and informed them of all that had been spoken by Yogamaya, who had revealed that he who was to slay Kamsa had already been born somewhere else.
After hearing their master's statement, the envious Asuras, who were enemies of the demigods and who were not very expert at their dealings, advised Kamsa as follows.
If this is so, O king of the Bhoja dynasty, beginning today we shall kill, born in all the villages, towns and pasturing grounds within the past 10 days or slightly more.
The demigods always fear the sound of your bowstring. They are constantly in anxiety, afraid of fighting. Therefore, what can they do by their endeavors to harm you?
While being pierced by your arrows, which you discharged on all sides, some of them, who were injured by the multitude of arrows, but who desired to live, fled the battlefield, intent on escaping.
Defeated and bereft of all weapons, some of the demigods gave up fighting and praised you with folded hands, and some of them appeared before you with loosened garments and hair. Said, O Lord, we are very much afraid of you.
When the demigods are bereft of their chariots, when they forget how to use weapons, when they are fearful or attached to something other than fighting, or when their bows are broken and they have thus lost the ability to fight, your majesty does not kill them.
The demigods boast uselessly while away from the battlefield. Only where there is no fighting can they show their prowess. Therefore, from such demigods we have nothing to fear. As for Lord Vishnu, he is in seclusion in the core of the hearts of the yogis. As for Lord Shiva, he has gone to the forest, and as for Lord Brahma, he is always engaged in austerities and meditation. The other demigods headed by Indra are devoid of prowess, therefore you have nothing to fear.
Nonetheless, because of their enmity, our opinion is that the demigods should not be neglected. Therefore, to uproot them completely, engage us in fighting with them, for we are ready to follow you.
That's appropriate. As a disease, if initially neglected, becomes acute and impossible to cure, or as the senses, if not controlled at first, are impossible to control later on. An enemy, if neglected in the beginning, later becomes insurmountable.
The foundation of all the demigods is Lord Vishnu, who lives and is worshipped wherever there are religious principles, traditional culture, the Vedas, cows, brahmanas, austerities, and sacrifices with proper remuneration.
O king, we who are your adherents in all respects shall therefore kill the Vedic Brahmins, the persons engaged in offering sacrifices and austerities, and the cows that supply milk, from which clarified butter is obtained for the ingredients of sacrifice.
The Brahmanas, the cows, Vedic knowledge, austerity, truthfulness, control of the mind and senses, faith, mercy, tolerance, and sacrifice are the different parts of the body of Lord Vishnu, and they are the paraphernalia for a godly civilization.
Lord Vishnu, the supersoul within the core of everyone's heart, is the ultimate enemy of the Asuras and is therefore known as Asura Devit. He is the leader of all the demigods because all the demigods, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, exist under his protection. The great saintly persons, sages, and Vaishnavas also depend upon him. To persecute the Vaishnavas, therefore, is the only way to kill Vishnu.
Would someone like to read the purport? Oh, we do the verse and the, right, okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 4th chapter, text 42. Sa hi sarva suratyaksho hi asura dvid guhashaya sa hi sarva suratyaksho Yasura Dvedku Hashaya Tanmula Devata Sarva Seshvara Satatur Mukha Ayam Vaitat Vadopayo Yadrishinam Vihimshanam Sahi Sarva Suradyaksho Yasura Dvid Guhashaya Tanmula Devata Sarva Seshvara Sachatur Mukha Ayam Vaitad Vadayo Bhayo Ayam Vaitad Vadopayo Yadvishinam Vihimshanam. Please chant. Sahi Sarva Suradyaksho Yasura Dvid Guhashaya Tanmula Devata Sarva Seshvara Sachaturmukha Ayam Vaitat Padopayo Yad Vishinam Vihimsanam Seshvara Sachaturmukha Ayam Vaitat Padopayo Yad Vishinam Vihimsanam Sahi Sarva Sura Taksho Yasura Dvid Kuhashaya Tanmula Devata Sarva Sejvara Sachaturmukha Ayam Tat Tibapayo Yad Vishina Vihimsanam Sahi Sarva Suradyaksho Yasura Dvitguhashaya Tanmula Devata Sarva Seshvara Sachaturmukha Ayam Vaitat Padopayo Yad Vishina Vihimsanam. Anyone else? Sahi Sarva Suradyaksho Yasura Kuhashaya Tanmula Devata Sarva Seshvara Sachaturmukha Ayam Vaitat Payo Yad Vishinam Vihimsanam. Can someone get me a hard copy of the Bhagavatam? My neck is like, ah. Oh, it's here? Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, this is good. Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking I could use my iPhone, but then I realized my iPhone is not connected to the internet. So in the same way, we have this material body, but if we're not connected to the disciplic succession, then we don't have access to this great knowledge. So, translation and purport. Text 42. We do the word for word? Yep. Okay. He, Lord Vishnu. He, indeed. Sarvasura Adyaksha. The leader of all the demigods. He, indeed. Asuradvit. The enemy of the Asuras. Guhashaya. He is a super soul within the core of everyone's heart. Tatmula, taking shelter at his lotus feet. Devata, the demigods exist. Sarva, all of them. Sayishvaraha, including Lord Shiva. Sachaturmukha, as well as Lord Brahma, who has 4 faces. I am, this is, Vai, Indeed, tatvada ubaya, the only means of killing him, Vishnu. Yat, which, Rishinam, of great sages, saintly persons, or Vaishnavas, Vihimsanam, suppression with all kinds of persecution. Translation, Lord Vishnu, the Super Soul, within the core of everyone's heart, is the ultimate enemy of the Asuras and is therefore known as Asuradvit. He is the leader of all the demigods, because all the demigods, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, exist under his protection. The great saintly persons, sages and Vaishnavas, also depend upon him. To persecute the Vaishnavas, therefore, is the only way to kill him, is the only way to kill Vishnu. Translation again, please repeat. Lord Vishnu, the super soul within the core of everyone's heart, is the ultimate enemy of the Asuras and is therefore known as Asuradvit. He is the leader of all the demigods, because all the demigods, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, exist under his protection. The great saintly persons, sages and Vaishnavas, also depend upon him. To persecute the Vaishnavas, therefore, is the only way to kill Vishnu. So you read this verse, and everything about the verse sounds very beautiful and glorifying Lord Vishnu. Then you come to the last line, to persecute the Vaishnavas, therefore is the only way to kill Vishnu. So here, this last line, they reveal the evil intent that is brewing within their demoniac hearts. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The demigods and the Vaishnavas especially are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, because they are always obedient to his orders. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashanti Surya. The demoniac followers of Kamsa thought that if the Vaishnavas, saintly persons and sages, were persecuted, the original body of Vishnu would naturally be destroyed. Thus they decided to suppress Vaishnavism. The Asuras perpetually struggle to persecute the Vaishnavas because they do not want Vaishnavism to spread. Vaishnavas preach only devotional service, not encouraging karmis, jnanis, and yogis. Because if one must liberate oneself from material conditional life, one must ultimately become a Vaishnava. Our Krishna consciousness movement is directed with this understanding, and therefore the Asuras always try to suppress it. Kananjana Shalakaya Jakshu Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Nadati Sva Padantikam Bandehang Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishtamamshcha Shri Rupam Sagurajatam Sahagana Raganatang Vitang Tang Sujivam Sadvaitang Savadutam Pradajana Sahitang Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Badan Sahagana Ladita Shri Vijakanvitangscha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So before beginning this discussion this morning on Srimad Bhagavatam, I'd like to try to quote for everyone's listening pleasure, a beautiful verse from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. I can only paraphrase it to the best of my ability, but it's a beautiful verse where he says, I am blind and my feet are constantly slipping. Therefore I pray for the stick of the mercy of the Vaishnavas to be my support. So before beginning, I'd like to pray for that mercy. All of you who are present. Actually, I was just reflecting when I remembered that verse. I saw that verse on the door of an ashram room in Boston Temple. I just came from there, and just reminded me. I haven't been in the Boston Temple in about 40 years, or maybe 50 years, and I just remember we're there when it was before I was initiated. I was having a lot of trouble controlling my senses, and the only outlet for sense gratification was Mahaprasad. So I remember one night at midnight, when everybody was asleep, I went down to the temple refrigerator where they store the Maha, and I opened it up, and I saw all the Maha been offered to the deities. I took it out, and I started to eat it. And all of a sudden, this 2-year-old toddler just showed up out of nowhere and started screaming at me, "Demon! Demon!" I was like shocked. Where did he come from? He was the son of Prajapati, which used to live here for many years. But anyway, so such are the memories that we store in our subconscious and how they surface at unexpected times. So this morning we're reading an incredibly powerful description of the demonic mentality. And it reminds me of a beautiful verse that Srila Prabhupada translated in 1961 in the first canto, from the 5th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam. Tadvag visargo janatag vipavo yasmin pratishlokam abhidhaviti api namanyatandasya yashankatani yat shivanti gayandi kurnanti sarava. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a transcendental creation filled with words meant to bring about a revolution in the impious lives of a misdirected civilization. Such literatures, even though irregularly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So we are all fully aware of how we are currently living in a misdirected civilization. On the way back from Boston, I was just reflecting on the horrific events that have taken place recently that are rocking the foundations of our West American culture. And specifically the murder of Alex Pritty in Minneapolis. And I was listening to one, I happened to come across a commentator who was saying that this may be a time when the President of the United States will now try to invoke the Insurrection Act, to give him the powers that he wants to, he feels are necessary to maintain law and order in our nation. And then when I heard that, I was thinking, well, Srila Prabhupada started an insurrection in 1965 when he brought the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam to the West. But this insurrection is not based on the violent use of guns or the weapons of hate. Rather, it is a revolution of love, of divine love. There was a poem that was written by a poet just 2 years before Srila Prabhupada arrived in Boston, who passed away just 2 years before Srila Prabhupada arrived in Boston. It's written by a poet named Robert Frost, called Fire and Ice. I thought I'd like to share it with you. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say it will end in ice. But what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough about hate. That for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. And it reminds me of a poem, of course a poem. Srimad Bhagavad Gita is a poem. It's a Sanskrit poem of 800 verses in the Mahabharata, which is the largest lyric poem known to man, over 100,000 verses. So in the 27th verse of the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Ichadveshas mutena dvanva mohena bhardata sarvabhutani sangmohan sagayanti parantapa. O sky Bharata, conqueror of foes, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. And I was thinking, this is a perfect description of these ministers of Kamsa, who are the perfect yes men. You can see if someone were to become a political leader in Kali Yuga, these ministers of Kamsa would be the perfect yes men to surround themselves with. And the reason why is because they are bewildered by dualities. As soon as we become bewildered by dualities, then from those dualities come desire and hate. Desire, as soon as we desire something in this world, we set up a duality of I have, not, and I want to have. Right? It's immediately a duality. And then as soon as we have that duality syndrome established, and anything that comes in the way of achieving what we think we don't have, that we need to feel complete, then we hate that thing, with whatever it is, a person or obstacle or situation. So this is the nature of the demoniac personalities. But what's so amazing is how in the Vaishnava tradition, we don't fight. We don't always have to fight hate with violence. And there's a beautiful story, a pastime that we hear in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. How one time the sages had gathered together along the banks of the Saraswati River, and they performed a yajna. And after the yajna, as sages oftenly do, they sit together like we're doing this morning, and they discuss the glorious pastimes of the Lord. Just like we performed the Sankirtan Yajna, and now we're discussing the Lord's pastimes. So during their discussion, the question came up, well, who is supreme? And I know you've all heard this story, but it's such a beautiful story. We can hear it again, right? It's not just because we've heard something before, we can't hear it again. When we're chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Then we go to our next speed, Hare Krishna. Oh, I'm not going to chant this because I heard it before. No, it becomes sweeter, right? The chanting, as we're chanting on our every time we chant the Maha Mantra, every time if we do with love and devotion, it becomes sweeter and sweeter. So in the same way with these pastimes. So in this pastime, the sages who inquired, well, of all the predominating deities of this universe, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, who is supreme? So they deputed Bhrigu Muni. And this is actually a very humorous pastime, I found, in some way. Very instructive, but also there's a very subtle element of humor. They deputed Bhrigu Muni to go test the three predominating deities of the cosmos. And he had a personal relationship with Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. He was a son of Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva was his brother. So when he went, there's three ways we can commit offense. We can commit offense by our mental activities in our mind. We can commit offense by our speech. And we can commit offense by physical action. So when he went to see his father, as we all know, especially in a civilized culture, when the son or the daughter come before their parents, they offer respects. Well, Bhrigu Muni, he wanted to test his father, so he came before his father and did not offer any prayers, did not offer any words of gratitude. And his father, Lord Brahma, immediately observed this and became very angry. And his anger became very noticeable. And he was about to curse Bhrigu Muni, but because of his quality of goodness, even though he's predominantly dealing with the mode of passion, he was able to control his tendency his inclination to curse his son. So Bhrigu noticed this. Then he immediately went off to Mount Kailas to see his brother, Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva was so happy to see his brother. I mean, can you imagine if you haven't seen your brother for a long time and he walks up, you just want to get up and embrace him and hug him and ask him, how are you doing? That's our tendency. Well, Lord Shiva immediately got up. He was sitting with Parvati, and he immediately got up to embrace him. And what did Bhrigu Muni do? Does anyone remember? He said, get away from me. You're dirty. You spread your body with the ashes of the crematorium. Don't touch me. So immediately Shiva became furious. And he picked up his trident. He was just about to kill his brother when Parvati, I was thinking it was almost like she was in the mood of Nityananda. Hopefully we'll have time to talk a little bit about his glories. She immediately bowed down at his feet and said, please, my lord, this is your brother, do not kill him. She pacified him, she convinced him not to do so. So then Bhrigu Muni said, okay, well, I can see my father and brother are also contaminated. They're not in the mode of pure goodness. So then he went to Lord Vishnu. He said, well, I've committed offense by the mind, I've committed offense by my speech. Let me see if I can get away with committing a corporal offense with my body. So he came before Lord Vishnu, who was lying on a bed of flowers, and Parvati was there massaging his feet, Lord Vishnu's feet. And Bhrigu Muni walked up to him, and he kicked him in the chest. So immediately Lord Vishnu got up and said, my dear Bhrigu Muni, I'm so sorry. I did not realize you've come in. I should have immediately gone up and offered you a nice place and given you a proper reception. I'm so sorry for not receiving you in the proper way. And my dear sage, you are a Brahmin. Your feet are very soft. And my chest is very hard. And you kicked my chest. You must have hurt your feet. Oh, my dear sage, please forgive me. And then Lord Vishnu took Bhrigu Muni's feet and began to massage them. And when Bhrigu Muni heard this, he couldn't say anything. Tears just started flowing from his eyes. He was speechless to see the love and the attitude of humility was present to its fullest extent in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he realized this, yes, Lord Vishnu, he is above the modes of material nature. And he went back and he told all the sages, and he went, Haribo! I don't know if they went Haribo, but they were very happy. They were very happy to realize that they finally found out who is free from the modes of material nature, who is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But sometimes we find in our preaching activities and in devotional life, we have to use anger. Can anyone think of some devotees who have used anger in devotional service? Hanuman, yes. When the Rakshasas lit his tail on fire with great anger, he went throughout Lanka, burning everything to the ground. Any other examples you can think of? Lakshman, yes. How did Lakshman use his anger? Can we get the microphone? I'd like to hear what you're saying for the benefit of all the devotees who may be here online.
When Sugriva promised Rama that after the monsoon season, after 4 months of the monsoon season, he will send the Vanaras to search for Sita, that after 4 seasons, when Sugriva didn't come, Lakshman became angry, and then Sugriva forgot to send the Vanaras to search for Sita.
Yes, it's a beautiful example. Any other examples we can think of? Mishra Bhagavan.
Well, one time somebody was throwing rocks and breaking the windows on the Radha Damodar bus. So Vishnu Jan Swami came out with a big steel pole. And he said, "Now you will die like a dog." And the man ran away.
Yes. Prabhupada.
That reminded me of, there was one time that I think was in New York at a Ratha Yatra, and Srila Prabhupada was there and he was speaking right at the event, and a lot of people were listening, and then so there was a fountain there. They were in one of the parks. There was a fountain, and there was one person from the audience that he was standing by the fountain, and he just started yelling at Prabhupada, saying, "Oh, this is a lot of nonsense, and this is Maya, and you're all heathen, and you're all going to hell," and all these things. And then this one of Prabhupada's disciples, Vaidinath Vasuprabhu, he lives in Gainesville now. He's this tall African American devotee, and he heard the guy. He was standing next to the guy. He just turned around and boom! He punched him, and he fell splashing into the fountain. You can hear it in Prabhupada's lecture. There's a recording. You can hear there's a pause, and then there's some commotion, and then Prabhupada just continues speaking.
I think over here
this pastime that Jaishnav so nicely narrated, I heard in one class that Lord Lakshman became angry because Sugriva was not grateful for what Lord Ram had done. So ingratitude is such a being grateful is such an important quality for a devotee. So that
yes.
And at one time in the San Francisco Rath Yatra, some black kids in San Francisco, they wanted to ride the chariot, and it was already full with the devotee kids. So then they went and then got their fathers, and they were doing a big commotion. And then one devotee, I think his name is Keshav Prabhu, he started flinging those people over the cars from this side of the street to the other side.
Wow, these are some very interesting, colorful examples, which I was kind of expecting the more, yes, Arjuna, and, on the moon. But this is like very shows what a broad spectrum of experiences we've all had in our devotional journey. And it raises an interesting point too. Like I like the point, Prabhu, that you brought up about gratitude. Swami Bhagavan Keshav Maharaj always, I remember him saying that gratitude is the mother of all virtues. But it brings up an interesting point of when to apply anger in devotional service and when not to. Just like, take for example, our blood. When you cut yourself, right, what happens? Blood starts to ooze out of the body, right? And then eventually what happens is the blood begins to coagulate, and it forms, it bonds. And that way the blood ceases to flow, and then the healing process begins. So that's very healthy, that's very good. If we didn't have that, nature did not, Krishna did not endow us that power of coagulation, every time we cut ourselves, we would just bleed to death, right? But that same healing principle can also work against us. For example, if the blood begins to coagulate in a blood vessel in the brain, the neurons no longer get oxygen, and we have a stroke, right? Just like I went to Boston to see my sister, and she actually suffered multiple strokes on both sides of her brain. And when that happens, our ability to control our impulses, there's certain parts of the brain that deal with controlling our impulses, that regulate our emotions, that filter our frustrations. These parts of the brain become damaged. So in the same way, when we are devoid of Krishna consciousness, right, what happens is we have, spiritually, we are running the risk, and we actually have a spiritual stroke. We lose our ability to control our impulses. We lose our ability to filter our frustrations and regulate our emotions. Because a devotee is able to fully depend upon Krishna at every moment. Therefore, Krishna, he knows, is my well-wisher. And that whatever desires I have, to please him, Krishna will fulfill. And simply by pleasing Krishna, all my desires will be satisfied. Just like if you have $100, automatically you have $10, $20, $30. So it reminded me of an interesting, how Krishna consciousness is so complete. They've done some studies in comparing the longevity of people in different countries. And they've discovered that in Costa Rica, people, even though they have 1/5 of the personal wealth of Americans, and they have a much poorer health system, the people live longer. You would think it'd be just the opposite. A poor country with, hardly any money. Right? And they discovered, upon further investigation, that there's one province in Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula, where people there are the poorest of Costa Rica. They have the most obesity and the most hypertension, and they live longer than anyone else in Costa Rica. So upon a further investigation, they realized that these people in this particular province, they have very close family ties. And they discovered that the people in that peninsula, in that province, who don't see children at least once a week, who live alone, they have shorter lifespan. And they determined, and they did a very interesting study, that in the human body, we have what is called, we all know, we've heard of like chromosomes or within the body. And there's strands of these chromosomes of DNA called telomeres. So what happens every time a cell divides in the body, the telomeres in the body, they get shorter every time they divide. It's like a yardstick. They break off. Right? And this shocked scientists because it showed how cells have memory, you know. And so I was reflecting, it would be interesting if we did a study in our devotional culture. It is so much based on sadhu sangha, and it is so much based on, you know, coming together and glorifying the Lord. Does this impact the length of our telomeres? It was just a thought. But it is interesting because it also raises a point that Srila Prabhupada says in this beautiful book, Life Comes from Life. He describes one day he's on this morning walk outside Los Angeles, and Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Dr. Thalmadin D. Singh, who was an organic chemist PhD from University of Southern California. He was a great scientist and also a great devotee. He asked Srila Prabhupada, so within the body, there are innumerable small living entities, but the individual self who owns the body is also living there. So that's correct. So Srila Prabhupada said, yes, in my body there are millions of living entities. In my intestines there are many worms. If they become strong, then whatever I eat, they eat, and I derive no benefit from the food. Then he says, there are millions of microbes, and each of these microbes are individual. Each of these microbes have a personality, but the difference is that we are the proprietor of the body. And just like if you have a garden and you leave your garden, right? Still there's spiders and ants and all kinds of living entities are there. So in the same way, we're in this body, and then when we leave the body, still there's also living entities there. So then the devotee, Srila Prabhupada, he said, so if I eat Krishna Prasad, food offered to Lord Krishna, are the living entities in my body also eating Prasad? Srila Prabhupada said, yes, you are very benevolent. You take Prasad for others. But it is an interesting meditation that when we take Prasad, actually material scientists calculate there's about 67 trillion living entities, cells, within our body. And as devotees, if we accept Srila Prabhupada's statements here, that each of these cells, there's about half of them are bacteria, most of them are good bacteria, the rest are human cells. Within each of those cells is what? The supersoul. And this is something that the scientists, are until they understand the existence of supersoul, they will not be able to understand how this universe is working, how the immune system is working. Right now they think it's all because of just mechanical actions, right? So this is part of the demoniac propaganda of modern civilization to suppress Vaishnavism, to suppress theistic understanding of the presence of God in every microbe, in every living cell, in every person, in every tree, in every plant, in every animal, mammal, aquatic. But there is the presence of God, and therefore we treat creation, we treat each other with love, awe, and reverence as a part and parcel of God. So then he reflections, thoughts, questions for clarification, realizations. experiences in devotional life anyone would like to share? Mission Bhagavan Baba.
As when devotees get old and they've been in the temple or coming to the temple for a long time, they have a tendency to get when they come to the temple, to get a little cranky, sort of, because they see Prabhupada's, they see that things that Prabhupada taught us are kind of fading away. Like you didn't like it when the child caught you when you got busted eating the maha, and then somebody comes along and tells you, you're a demon for doing that. So I noticed that people who tell others what to do are not very popular. But at the same time, there's so many. Prabhupada gave us, like in Nectar of Devotion, there's 64 different offenses to the deities that we're supposed to avoid. So how do we, should we just sort of like tolerate? When do we know it's a good time to try to give suggestions or try to get people to be aware of what Prabhupada taught us? Like sitting down during the arti. I wonder, Rupa Goswami says don't sit down during the arti. But then I wonder, like, if I go around telling people don't sit down during the arti, they'll be thinking, what's this man coming? I'd rather sit down. I don't want to stand up. So how do we kind of balance that, we want to correct people for their own good. We also have a tendency to be corrected. And then, or just, let it go and just, case has, laissez-faire, just let it sort of, everything just sort of work it out and mind our own business.
Well, thank you for you always ask very probing questions, which I think really help us churn the ocean of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'm very grateful for your question. And I'm sure many devotees here have thoughts on this topic. And I'd like to hear from them as well. But just when you said this, I just reminded me of something that Raghunath Maharaj one time told me. He said, we have a choice. We can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. And if we ourselves can set an example in our own life, then we build that trust. Because oftentimes, in the material world especially, no one likes to be told by others what to do. This is one thing I've realized in being with my sister for the past 2 weeks. She was a very successful person. And a lot of her success came from the fact that she was very independent, very self-reliant, hardworking. But now that she's in this situation, her sense of independence and self-reliance is working against her because she thinks she can do things which her body was not cooperating to do. So it's we all have in the material world, we have this tendency to want to be independent and not to be told what to do, right? And we have the examples of, like we told earlier, the story of Lord Vishnu. How it's not a question of, it's a question of always being prepared at every moment. Just like we breathe air, right? There's never a time when we stop breathing air, because without breathing air, we can't exist. Similarly, in this body. Similarly, there's never a moment where we in our spiritual consciousness, where we're not prepared. We should always be prepared to take instruction, to be chanadapi sunichena, tododapi sishnana, amanina manidena kirtanatsada hari. If we, as Lord Chaitanya instructs us, he gives us the perfect cure, that if we chant the holy name in a humble state of mind, thinking ourselves, more insignificant than the straw on the street, more tolerant than the tree. Right? People write their initials in the trees. The trees never object. Devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others. If you look at those verses, think oneself insignificant, right? Like a straw in the street. That immediately will enable us to be free from false prestige. And if we're always tolerant, then we'll automatically be ready to offer all respects to others. Why is it that sometimes we don't want to offer respect to each other? It's because, you annoy me. Right? And we can't tolerate that, right? I was just thinking of like the heart. The heart has 4 chambers, right? There's 2 atriums and 2 ventricles, right? Which our blood passes through, right? So for the blood to circulate through the body, you need these 4 chambers of the heart. So in the same way, for our Krishna consciousness to circulate throughout our lives, we always have to be using the muscle of these 4 principles of our devotional attitude to be thinking ourselves more insignificant than the straw on the street, to be more tolerant than a tree, to be devoid of all sense of false prestige, to be ready to offer all respects to others. In that state of mind, we can always chant the holy name. And that will protect us from that. If we don't have those things, we have a spiritual heart attack. Right? Our spiritual consciousness is disrupted. Would anyone else like to share their thoughts and realizations on this beautiful question?
Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's, when we have to, if someone needs to be corrected, it can be a sensitive thing, because people nowadays are very sensitive. And so it should be done in a caring mood, not in a cranky, irritated, what's wrong with these people kind of mood. Because sometimes devotees, I've seen they correct somebody, but it's kind of like the mood is a little bit of a lording it over, and then it makes the people feel bad, it makes them feel discouraged and stuff. So the best thing is that before we correct the person, we should have a relationship with them, or we can speak to someone who we know who has a relationship with them. Or, if it's just a little thing like sitting down during RT, we could, say if it's during Sunday program, we could ask whoever's emceeing it to just make a general announcement. Now it's time for RT. Everyone please stand up, which is the etiquette for the RT. And then the person doesn't feel targeted, singled out, and, So, anyways, we should, education and training has to be there, but then there's a right way to do it, and to find who's the best person to speak to that person, what's the best way to get the message across. Because we want people to feel welcome and encouraged and supported, and, so they'll keep coming and keep all the relationships nice.
That's very nice. Thank you. That's very, very practical, suggestion, advice. Kokolananda Prabhu, you have any thoughts on this matter?
Hare Krishna. I was just reminded when I was in the temple room, that was my service to receive the guests. One time after Bhagavatam class, during the question answer session, this question was raised. And Radhanath Swami gave my example. He said, if somebody walks into the temple, any guest, with the kids, and kids are, they're restless at times. So what is the boundary line that we draw, when to chastise and when to not? So he said, unless and until the child starts asking, we used to have a lot of, like Vrindavan, they tried to depict Vrindavan atmosphere on the altar. So we used to have monkeys on the altar. He said, if the child is asking, demanding that I want that monkey, so that is the time, you need to go and, talk to the parents. So I was thinking, there cannot be any black or white answer here. At the time, place, situation, then who, when, where, how, why. This has to be considered. Like for example, in an Indian setup, it would be nice if the non-devotees, the newcomers are to be corrected. It would be nice to just ask the security guys in certain situations instead of devotees dressed up in the devotional attire, because sometimes they are taken aback and they feel offended. So it's a time, place, situation. Then who is correcting, when, what situation, why, where, how. This needs to be taken into consideration. Otherwise, as Prabhupada said, the operation would be successful, but the patient is dead. We don't want to do that. And also in Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful verse, right? Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyam.
I was just opening to that, yes.
Yeah, if you can read that, I think that is relevant here.
This verse, I think, is also helpful. Krishna says in the 17th chapter, he says, austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So I just wanted, it's a very short purport, but this, I think Srila probably really illuminates this question. Purport: one should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students. But such a student should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. That is penance as far as talking is concerned. So, and then that goes back to Prabhu's point about relationship, building that relationship of trust will enable the medicine of instruction be assimilated by someone.
Something else that stood out to me from this verse is the last line of the translation, where it says that to persecute the Vaishnavas, therefore, is the only way to kill Vishnu. So I thought that was interesting, that even the demons know about the intimate relationship between the Lord and his devotees. That if you really want to hurt the Lord, hurt his devotees, because he's gonna. That's worse than, if you want to please the Lord, please his devotees. That's the best way to please the Lord, is by pleasing his devotees. But if you want to displease the Lord or kill the Lord, the best way is to hurt the devotees, persecute the devotees, kill the devotees. So yeah, it kind of like implies, the effects of Vaishnava Aparad, right? That when we offend the devotees, it's basically like death for the Lord, like it's just so damaging to our relationship to Krishna whenever we offend devotees.
Well, thank you so much for everyone's contribution and kind attention. On that sobering note, let us offer our respectful obeisances. Vanchakalpatyubhascha kripasindhubheva-cha padinam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sadhu Sangha ki.